Now, the centre-left Social Democratic Party, or SDP, is one of several political parties that are taking part in the off-season governorship election in Kogi State in November. But if the SDP is to be believed, there is considerable violence taking place against its governorship candidate, Murtala Ajaka, and his supporters in the state ahead of that ballot, with the SDP accusing the ruling APC party of being behind it. The SDP claims that innocent citizens are being killed and injured and property vandalized and destroyed by people it describes as state-sponsored political thugs. Well, the APC's campaign council in Kogi State has pointedly denied sponsoring any attack against SDP supporters in the state. So what proof is there of this alleged violence against the SDP? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the national chairman of the Social Democratic Party, or SDP, Alhaji Shehu Gabam. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. We really appreciate your coming to talk to us. So, allegations from the SDP that your candidate in the governorship election in Kogi State, Murtala Ajaka, and his supporters are being attacked by what you call state-sponsored thugs, people reportedly being killed and injured, property being vandalized. Tell us more about that.
Well, I can say that it's quite very disappointing, especially at this period that we are, given the history of where we are coming from politically. I can say from 1999 to date, we ought to have learned our lesson. Politicians ought to have adjusted their behavior. We would have behaved in the most civilized way, conduct ourselves very civilized, because election is about the people, and that is why it is called democracy. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But what we are seeing today, state actors have turned to emperors. And then the federal government or the party that is in power have always supported them to do whatever they want without checkmating their excesses. And that is what is causing the instability that you are seeing in the country today, including the racketeering of the processes that we felt that by now should have been defined, well established, so that we can have credible election. Now, coming to Kogi State, like you have mentioned, this is not the first time we are going through this carnage. If you could remember, which has been in public space at the doorstep of every Nigerian, when our former gubernatorial candidate Natasha Apoti was contesting, she went through this heinous attack at the point where the former IG was there at the reconciliatory venue. She was beaten down to the ground. You know, all of them were there. We went through that. We fought. Our office was vandalized, was burnt at that period. It's the same kind of carnage we are going through in Kogi today. Our office was vandalized twice. The first was there was an attempt to burn it. They couldn't succeed in getting through the offices. They pulled down the flags and burned them. The second time, they went back and burnt the whole thing. And what will surprise you is that we tried to be as modest, as decent as possible. We documented all these things. We submitted to the President and Commander-in-Chief. We draw his attention to the possible catastrophe that will come, as a result of this. He was just sworn in as the President and Commander-in-Chief. This will be the first election he's going to conduct. And he should try as much as possible to talk to the security agencies to ensure there's a balance of behavior. People should feel free to come out and cast their vote without being molested or being arrested or being persecuted for political reasons. Now, all these things were documented, and we called a world press conference where we tendered all this evidence. We also spoke to the IG of police. These documents are before him. All the service chiefs of Nigeria, documents are before him. And not only that, we went further to the court of law, seeking for the protection of our candidate, to which graciously the court granted and ordered that he should not be arrested, he should not be witch hunt by any reason, and ordered security agencies to provide security around him. The situation went down a little bit, thinking that things are normal. The governor have come to terms with the reality that Murtala Ajaka is a candidate. There's no longer any other way of trying to take him out of the race. We went through the process of INEC. We followed every process, and INEC declared him as a candidate of the party. And therefore, I have not seen any justification why a state should deploy arsenals against the opposition party. We are all Nigerians. We are all stakeholders, and this electoral process is for all parties to participate. Now, if the federal government would not provide an enabling environment for all the political parties, there was no need to register a lot of political parties. It would have been just a one-state system. But if the federal government is committed, you know, by the oath of office, protection of life and properties, and then the freedom of every Nigerian to cast his or her own vote according to her own choice, it means the federal government needs to go beyond what they are doing. They are using shadows and allow innocent citizens that made up their mind go through the pens, go through the queue to cast their vote, almost impossible. Right. It's one of the reasons why we have low turnout of voters nationwide, because of the kind of behaviors where people's life doesn't matter.
Well, you've spoken very broadly and very eloquently about the things that ought to be, but I'm much more concerned about the specific allegations that your party is making. One of them being that there have been attacks by state-sponsored thugs. I mean, you talked about burning your office and so on, but your people in Kogi State have talked about people being killed and injured and property vandalized and so on. What sort of casualty numbers are we talking about?
I can't give you a specific number of casualties. First, the candidate narrowly escaped. His car was pierced with bullets.
But I mean, were people killed? Because you're saying that people were killed. That's part of what was...
Well, I didn't say people were killed.
I'm not saying you specifically.
Yes.
I'm saying
yes.
The reports quoting your people have said that people were killed.
Well, I think this fact will only come out from the security agencies, because when we submitted our report, the police said they are conducting a thorough investigation, including the state security services. They are in a position to mention specific number of people that were killed. If really the service...
Yeah, but you would know. I mean, if you're making allegations and it's your party and your party supporters, surely you must know who's been killed and who hasn't.
No, I wouldn't know exactly. I'm the national chairman of the party. I use information available to me. But I know people have been harassed, people have been detained, including the candidate of the party, and I know investigation is ongoing. We urge the president to direct thorough investigation into this level of crime and criminalities. We have also shown videos of vehicles being burned, people being beaten, houses being vandalized. And we have, there's a video of also somebody that was killed, even though the government said that he's a murderer and so on and so forth. But he was with the government. Now, when he left the government, he was with Muri, he became a criminal, he became an assassin, he became a kidnapper. You know, so these are the flip-flop that you find it extremely very difficult to understand. So for us to go to specific, and for me not to be stupid, is for the government agencies that are responsible for investigating crime and criminality to understand that their service is not to people in government. Their service to every Nigerian, because they are being paid by public funds. And they have to come up with facts, because I saw some deniers. I saw some level of harassment emanating from government agencies and officials of the government of the states, trying to suggest that at any time they can pick and arrest any individual. So these are the kind of impunity we are talking about. We don't want to take it as a hit back kind of situation, because we have the capacity to balance the terror. If we want to balance the terror, we have the adequate mobilization in Kogi State, but in whose interest? If we destabilize the state, who will pay for it? The innocent citizens will pay for it. Absolutely. If you remember, there was the woman that was burned alive in Kogi State during the last governorship election. A lot of people were killed. It's in security's record. This is what we are trying to avoid, because if we take it that we will hit back, only God knows the number of casualties we are going to have. Our candidate is the most rated candidate in Kogi right now by every analysis, by every statistics that have been generated, and therefore is a maximum threat to the government.
I'm going to come to that in a minute, that rating that you talk about your candidate. But I'm still very interested in the evidence that you have to support these allegations and the fact that you're pointing the finger at the APC in Kogi State.
I think, let me repeat myself.
Right.
We made this allegation not just verbally, we documented it.
And it was linked back to the state government.
Names were mentioned.
Right.
The documents are before the president, are before the IG of police, are before the service chiefs. All documents have been served with pictures of properties burnt, vehicle burnt, and then individuals that have been captured by cameras and other technologies. So we did not just speculate. We attached facts,
right,
documented and submitted to the federal government, which we feel, naturally should provide an enabling environment for everybody to succeed. Nobody knows tomorrow. PDP have never thought that after 16 years, a party can assemble themselves together and defeat them. So nobody knows who will be a governor of Kogi tomorrow except God. But the fact is that we must be decent in our conduct. We must abide by code of morality and decency. Era of recklessness and imperialism in politics should be a history by now.
Absolutely.
We cannot be experimenting from 1999 to date. If you minus the level of development Nigeria have gone through, if you minus the military era, you can virtually identify any tangible development that we have gone through. So which means that the embedment of corruption is deeply in a democracy that is supposed to be government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And the actors were allowed to act with impunity without checkmating their excesses. Officials of government take away public funds in trillions. Nothing happened. It's part of what you mentioned. The economy is on its knees. So what I'm saying is that given the fact that this president was sworn in not too long ago, he just celebrated 100 days in office. And now you are having off-season election of 3 states, Imo, Bayelsa, and Kogi States. The whole 3 states have their own flashpoint of security issues. Imo as well. And then Bayelsa also have areas where it's a flashpoint. And now what we are telling the president and commander-in-chief, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, look, history will record you. Posterity will record you. If you do not call the people that you are their commander and you deploy them, you will answer the call of posterity. Create an environment where a political environment will develop, where people cannot take laws into their hands, where security agencies will understand their service as the citizens of Nigeria. They are being paid by public funds, me and you, out of our tax. And therefore, for security agencies or their commandants to give them directive of who to support or who not to support, this will never go well for Nigeria. It will never go well for our democracy.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, because you mentioned earlier the rating, the way the candidates are being rated in Kogi State. If these attacks that you talk about are happening, and you say that they are, I mean, why the SDP? Are you more of a threat to the APC government than the PDP or Labour or the other parties? I mean, I'm curious to know.
SDP is the ultimate threat in Kogi State. There is no threat to APC apart from SDP. Then you can say PDP. That is the truth on ground. We are the only party that have campaigned across the entire local governments. As I'm talking to you, the candidate is in Kogi. He's campaigning virtually everywhere. We have consulted sufficiently, and you can see the mobilization on ground. You can see the crowd pulling on ground. And we did not ignite any violence all the campaigns through. If you go through all our campaigns, the videos are there. There's no single place where violence was recorded. So we are not for violence. We are for victory. And secondly, my fear is not really the violence itself. My fear is that the system is likely to be truncated. Because if INEC really cannot conduct an election in an environment that is full of violence, which means INEC is not independent. Now, the arm of government that defines the independence of INEC is the executive arm of the government. The executive arm of the government deploys security agencies. INEC can only deploy election materials. That's what defines their independence. They produce election materials, they deploy them so long as the environment is conducive. If it is not conducive, there is nothing INEC can do about it. The infrastructure is not being controlled by INEC. The fuel stations are not being controlled by INEC, and so many other things. So INEC is independent to an extent that the environment is conducive for them to produce, to deliver the election materials as sensitive or whatever they are to that particular polling unit. So long as violence have enveloped that area, there's no way election can take place. What is happening in Kogi, some people believe that nobody will win election without them or without their approval or without their permission. And this cannot happen. That era is gone.
Well, I mean, Shehu Gabam, you've been in Nigerian politics for quite some time, and you're certainly one of the noted and respected voices of Nigerian politics. So it is your sense, is it, that Nigerian politics seems to be getting worse, not better?
Nigerian politics is getting worse, and I'm shocked about it, to tell you the honest truth. Look, if you take the last election that we went through, what is the total votes that produced the president? 8-point-something million. If you go back to history, what's the total vote that produced President Shehu Shagari? Now, coming to 1999, what's the total vote that produced President Obasanjo, Yaradua, Jonathan? You have Buhari. Now we are ending up with 8-point-something million votes to produce a president. And what is the statistics of the total number of registered voters in Nigeria? It's 90-something million registered voters. Now the voters' apathy is extremely very high. The loss of legitimacy is growing day by day. And government is not putting their priority right. The political environment is extremely becoming very chaotic. People are losing faith in the system. There's no integration. There's no deliberate policy of assimilation. There's no deliberate policy to look, this is our country. We must work together. I'm just coming from 74 China anniversary. And the ambassador to China said that it was a deliberate policy. They developed a vision of a communist party that have economic blueprint, political blueprint, integration blueprint, and so on and so forth. It interferes with all the segments of economic development and integration of China. And, you know, my mind keep on buggling and back and front, given the level that we are coming from. I was privileged to be among those who founded PDP in 1999 from G7. I know the trouble, the turbulence we went through to restore democracy in Nigeria. How we work with the military, politically, diplomatically, for them to go back to barrack. And at this level today, we are depreciating. Politicians have not learned their lesson, the lesson of give and take, allowing the country to be stable, sustainable, believable by the future generations. It's shocking to me that at this level that we are, we have not developed a system that will allow a citizen to go and cast his vote without fear of molestation or losing his life or getting injured. Was it that we don't have the capacity? The answer is no. But simply because the politician, the elitist class, still believe that nobody should become anything without their consent. That is the fundamental thing. Two, the government or the party that was in power, the PDP that I was in, lost power because of recklessness and impunity and imposition. And the same APC is not learning their lessons. They are doing the same. Because in the civilized society, where leadership have gone through a lot of turbulence and experience, what you need to do is to remodel the process and give confidence to the system and restore law and order, create deterrence for those who are always championing the cause of instability in a democratic process. What is the difference between a military regime and a politically, a democratically elected government? Because people queue in and elected that government. And they have the right to air their views. They have the right to existence. They have a right to economic policies. They have the right to political environment. But why is it today? So I'm very sad about it because I invested my life contributing to economic and political development of this country. Well, that we are retrogressing.
I have to say that you've spoken very powerfully this evening. I don't think I've ever heard you speak quite as powerfully as this. And I mean, just moving slightly away from that election, along the lines of what I'm saying just now, I mean, I've been wondering exactly what the SDP's status is on a national level. I mean, you are a member of the opposition, or I'm wondering whether you're a cooperating part of the government in power. I mean, as you were, I think, when you pledged support for President Buhari in 2019. I mean, because, I mean, you've been sepulchrally silent. I mean, beyond what you're just saying now, which is the first time I've really seen you go for the jugular there. I mean, you've been sepulchrally silent of late, almost reclusive on a national level, and no one seems to know where you stand on things. I mean, apart from what you've just said, you know, quite, I mean, you know, forcefully just now.
I think of recent you've not been following my media engagements, if you've been following, you will not say what you have said. I will be the last person to be a sycophant. I'm a progressive.
I'm not saying you're a sycophant.
No.
I'm just saying
that it's related
you've
to
been fairly reticent.
It's related to that. I'm a progressively trained person by some of the quintessential politicians in the history of Nigeria. I know my target, I know my orientation, I know my background. I always go with facts that are available to me. Number two, I have mentioned here clearly that we have drilled. I'm part of that process of building a democratic institution of Nigeria. And we must admit, the very day politicians start running away from the facts, then anarchy is inevitable. And we are running away from the fact that we are not admitting that we are drilling. The drilling is at the highest scale that you can define. And we cannot get it right unless we admit we, the politicians, we are the one causing the problem of the country. We are the one mortgaging. I
think a lot of people would agree with.
We are the one mortgaging our common national interest and integrity. We are the one conspiring to loot the nation, to the detriment of the ordinary people.
I'm glad you said we, not they.
Yes, no, I'm not taking myself out.
Right.
I'm a key player in the system. I know what the system is. I've not been in government. I've been in government, one in the executive. I know the knowledge of executive very clearly. It's just like anybody to tell me about corruption. I've always said 70% corruption is embedded in the executive. And so long as executive cannot purge themselves of corruption, you cannot solve corruption.
So basically, you're admitting that the politician...
Just to take it back, you mentioned Buhari.
Right.
Those circumstances were different.
Right.
This era, from the election day, we made it clearly that we are not in alliance with any party. We are standing from our presidential candidate down to the state assembly members. We are not into alliance with any political party. And of course, by the grace of God, we want some Senate, we want House of Reps, we want some state assembly, and we want some tribunal cases. There is an appeal. We are expecting to lose more National Assembly members. So from zero gravity, when I took over the chairmanship of this party, to about 14 elected members right now. And we're expecting more after the tribunal cases. So we have moved on. So the issue of supporting someone, yes, if it is in the overall national interest, we will do it. The country belongs to all of us. It is our nation. We must invest. We must support it to move on. But areas where you need to make a very strong observation for posterity to judge you, I will never compromise that. No matter what
that's a very impressive thing to say.
I will never do that. And I have never done that.
That's a very heartwarming thing to hear you say, because basically the impression that has been there and that you have reinforced this evening is that the Nigerian politician is simply not there to carry the torch for the Nigerian electorate.
Yes, I can give you a simple example. We got it wrong after the formation of the political parties in 1999. The conceding to the interest of the military wing of the PDP then, that zoned the presidency to the south, specifically southwest, and to individual, was the foundation of what we are paying for today. Not because there are no competent, excellent career politicians from the south or southwest, but simply because there are fixated interests and trying to balance it and please the history of the June 12th. For that reason, career politicians were edged out completely. And those that have been part of the military patronage and acquire a lot of resources hijack the political process. And some of them become governors and ministers, and then they start expanding their political horizon through dictatorial tendencies. You can imagine a governor of a state where he has a multiple of ethnic or tribal, in that territorial degree of the states, being compromised simply because they don't belong to a certain ethnic group. And these same characters are the one contested to be the president of Nigeria. And you expect to have a country to be run under a free and fair or just system. It's not possible unless we keep on deceiving ourselves.
That's a very powerful statement,
unless
very true.
We start producing quality leaders, irrespective of tribe or religion, sending them to National Assembly to enact a law for the overall interest of the country, and deterrents are being created for those who sponsor violence or crisis or instability in the land. Otherwise, you have no solution to this problem. Look,
right. But
part
I mean,
of the racketeering and the barbarism Nigeria have gone through is under the era of President Muhammadu Buhari. Nigeria have never gotten it worse in our history. There was no time in history people were killed and maimed, and orphans being produced almost on daily basis, like under President Muhammadu Buhari. It's the foundation that we are going through today. Lawlessness and anarchy. Right. You have not had that during Obasanjo.
You know, you've talked,
governors were called to order.
Yeah, you've talked a lot. You've talked a lot this evening. Very, very powerful, very profound things you've said, which I think that a lot of people would hearken to if they really want to move this country forward, particularly politicians. But I have to wonder, though, because you're a politician. I mean, the SDP sees itself as certainly one of the top 5 parties in Nigeria. Is there perhaps something wrong with your strategy that makes the SDP consistently lose presidential elections? I mean, it's been a losing trend since you had Moshood Abiola as your candidate in 1993. I mean, you won that election, although it was taken away from you, but you've never won any election subsequently. And one would have thought that with that kind of momentum generated by Abiola and the subsequent sort of goodwill, I mean, after the bad things that happened, that followed the part, that your party would be a beneficiary of that.
Well, you know, that is an offshoot. This current SDP is an offshoot of the SDP of registered under Babangida's era. It was re-registered in 1999.
So it's a different incarnation.
But the same logo, the same slogans, everything, the same horse, all the same. All the principles are the same. You know, welfareism of the state and so on and so forth. Now, we moved from PDP to SDP. We injected capacity into the SDP. We generated the manpower that is required. We amended the constitution. We amended the manifesto of the party. And then we produced one of the best material then, Donald Duke, as the presidential candidate.
Yes,
one of the most transparent conventions
But then
ever.
you tore it all to pieces.
No,
by internal fighting within your party.
But then, of course, you will say that because you will not understand the dynamics or the inner.
Well, what about the dynamics? I mean, it didn't work.
The moment you are a threat to a party that is in government, the party would deploy every machinery available to make sure you have been destabilized. You can go through what the Labour is going through today. You can equally understand what the NPP is going through today. The moment you are a threat, the party have what it takes to move forward, and you are constituted a threat to the ruling party. That ruling party will deploy every arsenal available to make sure that you are not stable. Don't forget that also, factionalization of SDP was sponsored because we refused to support those who wanted to support them to run for president. They sponsored the factionalization of the party. Thank to court that have cleared all those things. Now, any party that have developed capacity to checkmate the excesses of the ruling party will undergo this kind of persecutions. They might be visible, they might be invisible. Now, you can also understand it takes resources to restore the dignity, the quality, stability of a party. It's heavily financially demanding. When you don't have those resources, they can use resources because they have weaponized poverty, you know, to create crack within the parties that are stable, that are making progress to build a base. And look, we are a democratic nation, and we are copying a presidential system of government. And by that definition, a civilized society or government should encourage other parties to develop, to spread development, to spread unity, to spread integration. But in our country, it's a different thing. Once you belong to an opposition political party, you are being seen as enemy, as if those who are in government is their father inheritors. When they die, their children will take over from it.
I like that.
And we have seen in this country, a serving head of state died in office. History have recorded that. A military head of state, a democratically elected president died in office. But that is not a lesson to politicians. Because of what? Because there was no deterrence. And the moment a nation have not developed its arsenals to create a deterrent for those who feel they are above the law, They can create anarchy and get away with it. You can burn villages, burn everybody, nobody cares. Nobody is safe. And what we are going through today, I'm sorry, democracy is under threat.
Well, you certainly
accept that.
You certainly sound like you care. And that does give one hope that it all is not lost. I want to thank you very much indeed, Alhaji Shehu Gabam. I mean, you've been firing on all cylinders tonight, I have to say. Absolutely brilliant listening.
We don't need to go through this as a nation. Nigeria is running a virgin economy, unexploited. And we refuse to open this economy. Our population is growing. In the next 5-10 years, we'll close to 300 million people. And you have so much resources embedded in every state of the federation. Poverty is killing, is maiming. People, the migration is unprecedented. People are not even migrating to local government and state. It's to the national. Right now, Abuja is becoming a center of kidnapping, virtually in all the locations. What are we talking about? Who is misleading who?
Right. I'm afraid I could talk to you for the rest of the program, but sadly, we have to move on. And just before you go, let me just point out very quickly that we've heard some very, very sad news. And I have to speak on behalf of Senator Shehu Sani, who we're expecting to come here. As he was on his way here, he got a message that a relative of his who he'd been looking after in hospital had passed away, and he had to go straight to the hospital to try and sort that situation out. So we extend our sympathies to Senator Shehu Sani and hope that he can get here whenever he can in the near future. But tremendous sympathy going out to him, and we appreciate the fact that they took the time to try and explain to us what was going on.